Thank you very, very much, Bruce. Sometimes things start quietly and work up to a climax. It's just the opposite in this meeting. We started with a charge. But thank you very much for a high-powered beginning, and it's going to stay that way, because we now hear from Joyce Murray of the MP of the Liberal Party, an MP for Vancouver Quadra, one of the historic and very distinguished constituencies of Canada. She comes to us with a varied background which qualifies her all the more to represent her people and to participate in the government of Canada. She did a Master of Business Administration on what really makes it perfect for tonight, on global warming. More than that, she has practiced what she was preaching, if that's a good word. It's a word I can use. She's practiced it because she was one of the founders of a reforestation business, which has planted, just get this, 1 billion trees. 1 billion trees. I mean, you sound like the national debt. It's just an incredible achievement. So Joyce, let's hear it.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much for that kind introduction. I think it was I didn't personally plant 1 billion trees, I can assure you of that. However, I planted 500,000, and I still have the calluses to show for it. So I want to acknowledge all of you here in the room, because you're committed to our country and to good public policy when you could be doing something else enjoyable this evening, like, I don't know, being out on a tree planting contract with the mosquitoes and the black flies, like my son and daughter have just headed out for a few days ago. But I really appreciate those very few people relatively in Canada who are paying attention to what kind of country we have and what kind of electoral system we need to have the country, the Canada that we want. So I come from a business background, as was mentioned, from planting a lot of trees and being in a lot of wilderness and seeing some of the choices that we can make as we develop our economies, choices that allow the environment to continue to be resilient and thrive, or choices that are that actually collectively impact our environment and eventually our society and certainly the generations to come. And so that's what drew me into politics. So I was a provincial cabinet minister with the British Columbia government, and had the great fortune to be the environment minister for about 3 years. And I went into politics because of my passion for the environment and doing the right thing for climate change. So I was well, actually, Bruce, you may, if you recall Bill C-311, there was a period where you probably wondered whether it would pass, because the rumor may have been that the Liberals were all going to be voting against it. And I didn't know Bruce at the time, so it was not his charm that led me down the pathway to change the mind of our leader and our caucus. But I mounted a campaign through understanding why it was important for us to support that, and then doing what you do in politics, is you work to persuade people to your point of view. And I was successful, and every single Liberal voted for Bill C-311 and it passed. I just want to acknowledge Bruce for doing something as difficult as he did as a new member of Parliament, and as important as he did. And the killing of it by the Senate was a travesty, as he mentioned. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to go to these questions that we were asked to ponder, and the first one is how good or bad Canada's action on climate change has been. Well, as someone who's been an activist since 1992, when I wrote my thesis and proposed a way forward for Canada that would have accomplished 1/3 of our targets of a program that I basically cooked up at that time because we didn't have Kyoto or targets at that time. It's very disappointing to see how little we have accomplished, and however, it's not all doom and gloom. I have a report from Canada's Emissions Trends Report, and this is done by Environment Canada, and what they show is that we actually began to reduce emissions. You're not going to be able to see this at the back, but this top black line that goes up actually first comes down. So between 2005 and 2010, we were reducing emissions. Now, not coincidentally, that was after by the Liberal government of the day in negotiating Kyoto, ratifying Kyoto, against, of course, a lot of pressure by the Conservative and Reform opposition, and then starting to educate the public, the provinces, and industry. So the voluntary emission reduction program was actually pretty effective in that day. And so we started to see emissions coming down in 2005 as the result of a number of years' work. Now, I was in the middle of that because I was the provincial environment minister and meeting regularly with other ministers of the environment and energy, including the federal ministers, twice a year in different parts of the country. We didn't make the kind of progress that I had hoped that we would make, but one of the things that is a legacy for me personally is that I worked with my own colleagues in Premier in a very concerted way over the 4 years that I was in cabinet to educate them as to the need and also the nonpartisan nature of climate effort. And so early in the second term, the BC Liberals produced their plan with a carbon tax and a very ambitious target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and a whole plan around that. So that was the product of a lot of work of a lot of people, but I did a lot of the front work to educate and bring people together, and the initial plan was on my watch. So that's, British Columbia is doing its part. Ontario accounts for a lot of the reductions that we're seeing today, but net from 2010 on, the projection is that our emissions will actually be increasing and not being reduced. So Canada's ability to meet even its woefully weak target set by this Prime Minister is virtually nil. At the same time, the United States is on track to achieving the same target. So that's pretty impressive. So just, I guess in terms of our action on climate change, the government does get some credit for their emission reduction plan for vehicles, but everywhere else it's been a complete failure. And the failure to regulate the oil and gas industry is just a travesty, and that will be accounting for a lot of Canada's, so this you can just maybe vaguely see this bar graph. This bar down here is the oil sands. So that's emissions increases over the coming years due to the oil sands, which basically wipes out any of the gains made by coal-fired plants being closed and every other initiative in every province and industry. So I think that's a legacy that this Prime Minister and his government will wear down in the decades to come and in history, that the kind of betrayal of Canadians is very costly and unfortunate. So the answer to that question is a bad job, clearly. So the next question is, could proportional representation make a difference? Well, of course it can make a difference. And one of the reasons it was one of the issues that one of the commitments I launched my campaign on, which was on electoral reform, was because I've saw the kind of toxic divisive politics in Ottawa that Bruce was so eloquently describing, and it was clear to me that it's not bad people, it's a bad electoral process. And it actually rewards and incentivizes the kind of underhanded behavior and the negative attack ads, and do what you can get away with in the elections. If you get away with it, you get more votes, you get more seats, you get more power, and then you can change the rules further to help your cause, like the Unfair Elections Act. So so just to go back to that for a moment, I was a candidate in the recent Liberal Party of Canada leadership race, and was very proud to come a decisive, if somewhat distant second to Justin Trudeau. So it was a fabulous experience, and I did it because I thought I could win. Most candidates are optimistic, but I wanted to present some progressive ideas that I knew many members of our party and our society champion, and so it was a fun and very positive experience. So clearly I'm committed to electoral reform, and but what I want to say is proportional representation is not the answer to climate change. It will be one of the answers if we have a less divisive and we have a more cooperative electoral system and then governing system. It's an important step, but there are other hurdles. It's not a left-right issue either. There are people in the New Democratic Party who are not committed to climate action. And that's why you saw this situation in British Columbia where the NDP had a campaign called Axe the Tax. And they spent 4 years campaigning against the carbon tax and the plan that the BC Liberals had put forward. So there's no guarantee that if you get a combination of Liberals, NDP, and Greens in the House and having the ability to make governing decisions, that you're actually going to be home free on climate. And so I thought I'd just talk a bit about the philosophy of that. So what is in the way of us making what those of us in the room that came here because of climate change see to be a very rational decision for the sustainability of our ecosystems, our economies, for the sustainability of opportunity for our children and their children, for biodiversity, for all of those reasons. Why is it rational to us and yet not so apparent to so much of the population of all parties, perhaps the Green Party accepted? So I want to talk about two challenges. So one of them was laid out by there's an author that I read recently, William Uphals, and I didn't have my BlackBerry to look up the name of the book, but essentially he's an evolutionary psychologist and philosopher, and he says that we have a 2 million year old brain because we evolved over 2 million years, and that brain is very good at taking action on short-term, immediate personal threats. Like you've got a mountain lion that's about to leap on you, but it is not very good at taking action that could cause immediate, say, discomfort or sacrifice possibly for long-term and very distant threats. And so we are not wired as a human species to take action on climate change because it is exactly the kind of problem we didn't have to deal with as we were evolving over 2 million years. So his solution is that people need to become more conscious and self-aware through whatever path they do that, because otherwise our limbic brain, our reptilian brain, will overcome our rational brain and our cerebral cortex every time. And so that's what you see happening you see that again and again, where it looks like we might be making some progress, and then someone comes up with it's a tax on everything, something that is short-term, immediate fear-mongering, and people actually are wired to listen to that. So evolving our consciousness so that we have the kind of balance that we can override that limbic brain is Mr. Oppolz's solution. I have to say that that's a pretty big challenge for us as a society, and it's one that the young generation is going to really be facing and having to come up with some creative solutions. I spent a number of days last week at a 20th anniversary conference in Arizona, put on by the University of Arizona, called Toward a Science of Consciousness. And so it is some of the lead scientists, physicists, philosophers, experimental psychologists, even had Deepak Chopra there, looking at what does the science of the brain say about consciousness. Most of the people were between 40 and 80. Not a single person mentioned climate change. So it's like it didn't, it's like the reality and the urgency of this issue, to me, permeates whatever else I do. But I was surprised that didn't even come up. So that's, the second philosopher's name is John Haidt, if anybody has read any of his book, The Righteous Mind, for example. So the second problem is the framing of this issue. It's been mostly framed to appeal to progressive people as a fairness issue and as an equality issue and as a compassionate issue. But what Jonathan Haidt proposes is that we have to actually frame it in a way that people who vote conservative can get it and have an immediate understanding and a sort of an automatic, their limbic brain goes yes. So he's been talking about you frame it as a patriotic issue that and as opposed to a caring issue. And so what we've seen is that the president, who's working with John Haidt's methodology, came out and said, I will not betray our children and grandchildren by failing to take action. So he's trying to widen the group of who cares about this. Because we can have PR, but if enough of the population doesn't get it or care, we can't get there. So, and then recently, so a patriotic framing. Recently, the president said, he said that America has a proud history of being a leader. We want to be a leader in the clean economy, and so we're going to take away the subsidies to the oil and gas industry, and we're going to put them towards clean energy, which was exactly in my platform as well, by the way. But he put it out as a patriotic issue. We want America to be #1 again. We don't want to be lagging China and these other countries. Let's be #1. And so, fantastic. They're starting to figure some of that out. So, how do we get there? It's a huge challenge. Electoral reform has failed several times in various provinces. And I think that we have to stop pushing an individual, I don't know, STV or MMP or this or that. And we need to work more together. People who want change have to work together and stop fighting each other. Don't kick out someone out of the proportional representation camp because they're talking about ranked ballot in Toronto, for example. I mean, there's a lot of examples. We need to work together because we need to be talking to others about why it matters to have change, what we want to do to change, and then we can talk about how, whether it's this set of numerals or that set of, so why, what kind of Canada do we want to have? And it takes engaging Canadians to have the kind of Canada we want to have. So why? Let's talk about why. We want people to care, to be involved, to be active, and they're not, as Bruce again said so well under our current system. So why we want this, what we want is change so that we can have the conditions where people can work together and address these issues and bring forth the kinds of policies and legislation that we need to have a sustainable society and address climate change. And then we can get into how we do that. So I'm encouraged to see so many people who care about this and are here tonight. I know that my time is now up, and looking forward to the rest of the debate. So thanks so much for your time.